What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to a Tuesday night edition of GRID Live Encore, and I suppose a GRID Live wrap-up combo show in many respects as well. I'm Ben Schneider, joined as always by Brandon Crossland, and a very special guest joining us tonight as well. We'll bring him on in just a moment. But first off, Brandon, how are you doing tonight?
Doing all right, Ben, and it's all things considered, with the rain just kind of taking over the weekend. It's been a great weekend, all things considered, and also just coming off the huge weekend for motorsport fans. It's really been great.
That shows you the kind of week it's been for me here. I've forgotten to take the music off the loop, and even though
I can't have enough of that intro loop, man. It's fantastic.
I unchecked the loop, and there we go. We got it to stop now. All right. Man, I
jammed to that thing in my head after the show's over with. So
there we go. Well, let me tell you, man, it's been kind of a crazy week for everybody here. Obviously, the weather in Charlotte, the Xfinity teams, we'll talk about this a little bit later on in the show. They got a massive sort of deal ahead of them trying to get out to the West Coast for these two races coming up here at Portland and Sonoma. I've got to do the same thing because I'm going to be joining Joe out there for the Grid Network, and then Brock Beard and Last Card on Info next weekend. So a busy time for me, busy time for everybody involved in the sport. And I want to, especially on this weekend, give a shout out to our Patreon supporters, Colin Deschelle, Mark Robin, and David. On weekends like this, upcoming in particular, your support goes a very long way. It helps me get out there to be on site with Joe Samaniego and cover Portland International Raceway's weekend on site. We are so looking forward to bringing you extended coverage this weekend. And if you support us here on Patreon, you will allow us to do that on a slightly more regular basis going forward. So if you like what you see tonight, please consider joining these fine folks in supporting us there as well. Or if you'd rather make a one-time donation, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box below, so you can take that and run with that as well. Now, Brandon, I know that we had this discussion the other night on the wrap-up show. We are very much aligned in terms of how we feel the finish to the Indy 500 went and how race control called that. But you and I don't live in an echo chamber. We want to hear different opinions and different points of view. And a good friend of the show, Matthew Owens, who frequently is in our chat room through his Behind the Mic account, he was calling the race for USRN, and shortly after the finish, he tweeted this, saying that is why you do whatever you can to preserve a green flag finish at the Indianapolis 500. And because I want to be challenged, I want to hear different perspectives, and I want to have this debate and this discussion with somebody that I trust and know will keep things respectful and do a very good job of presenting the opposition and the other side of things here in that point of view. Matthew Owens very graciously has offered to take some time from his vacation in France tonight to join us on GRID Live Encore, and he joins us now. Matthew, great to see you. Thank you so much for doing this. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, great. Thank you, guys. As always, I am glad to be with you. And I just don't understand if you didn't like the finish, why you continued to watch. I don't know why you just didn't stop watching. Isn't that what you're supposed to do?
That's what I've been telling him.
All right, all right. Never mind. You're off. We're not doing this.
Come out.
No, Matthew, in all seriousness, thank you so much. And I'm just going to give you the floor. Just go, my man. Why do you feel that the Indianapolis 500 should be a green flag finish no matter what? Why do you think that our mentality is a little bit wrong here, to be quite frank?
Okay, so obviously respect everyone's opinions, especially you two. The way I look at it is as someone that counts down to the day of the Indianapolis 500, basically from the day it ends to the day it gets back. And I know there's plenty of people, I'm not unique in that. There's a lot of people that do that as well. Their life centers around the Indianapolis 500, and there were 330 plus thousand people there. I just think for all of those people that you jam into the arena and the millions others watching around the world, I think you've got to do whatever you can to preserve a green flag finish. Now, that's not to say that it needs to happen, whatever by whatever means. Because I totally get your point. It's 500 miles. I think that distance should stay set. We shouldn't be going to overtime. I did get that. I don't believe that. But I think that when you're a race fan, especially a fan of this race, and you do whatever you've done to either watch the race or especially get in to the racetrack itself. I think that's something, if you can, as best you can, guarantee a green flag finish, I think you need to. And I think they did everything right, in my mind, on Sunday. I'll say this, too, about it. I get the feeling we had 2 red flags. I get the kind of feeling that they were ready to be done with it. They would have ended it under yellow and not thrown that 3rd red flag if we didn't have the 3 cars side by side on that restart accident. I think that kind of put them into a box and said, I don't know if we want to end this race going back. I mean, that's 2002 Elio Castroneves and Paul Tracy on steroids, on when do we freeze the field and who was in front, and we're 3 wide and we haven't even really taken the green flag yet. So I get the feeling they were ready to end it under yellow had it not been for that scenario.
Go ahead, Brandon.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to give you a chance to respond there if you wanted to take that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all ears. I'm still listening. First of all, Matthew, this is my first time getting to actually talk to you. I'm a huge fan of yours. So hello.
Thank you.
I did try to say hello to you earlier, but we had some technical problems backstage.
When do we not?
Yeah, we're right. But I completely hear your words here, and the idea that all these people have come here for this finish, and it's really great when they get it. I mean, thankfully I've been there for 2 of these green flag finishes, 2019 and 2021, and I'm glad in retrospect that they were green and not yellow. Just the part where it still clangs in my noggin is going back to the Aaron Bearden tweet that we saw, where like I really wish there was some sort of rule set by IndyCar and it wasn't just a judgment call every single year. And the same as you, I hold the Indy 500 at a very, very high regard. Love that race, and it's one of the best parts of the year. But I still can't wrap my mind around the inconsistency of it all, and it just irks me that this. And we've talked about on this show that it's kind of a culture shift kind of thing, not just in sports, but every form of entertainment, where entertainment is trying to creep itself over, and Game 7 moments are trying to creep themselves over into every facet of human existence. Of just, we need that gratification of the good stuff, every time. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if any of that makes sense, but
no, I think it makes perfect sense, and I guess a lot of it, there's a very fine line, clearly, to what is acceptable, and I get it. You have to stay within a certain box of rules, right? And I'm with you. I would like a rule to be a little bit more consistent. I was talking about this with some friends earlier today, and not just the 500. Does IndyCar need to come up with a rule and say, we will not red flag it if there's a caution after a certain point? And I'm thinking 98% of the race. Is that the number you want to put it? At Indy, that would be lap 196. So if there's a caution at or after lap 196, we're not going to red flag it. And what happens, happens. I don't know. That's kind of sort of a rule that NASCAR used to have. If you remember, before green, white checkers were brought up in 2004, they had a red flag lap. I don't know if that's something everybody would be playing with the same set of rules then, right? And I think that would be something that I think I was going to say everybody would love, but of course everybody doesn't agree on anything these days. But I think a lot of people would like that. I'll also say too, and I don't know if this directly or indirectly impacted their decision making on Sunday, but a lot of people were disappointed not getting a green finish at Texas earlier this year, and what was a phenomenal race. And we were probably going to get one of those classic Texas photo finishes, and we didn't get it because Romain Grosjean crashed with, 2 or 3 to go. Nothing you could really do in that situation, because I think it was with 2 to go. Nothing you could really do in that situation at Texas because if you try to throw a red flag, you would come down pit road, you'd cross the timing line, we'd be at 1 to go, and there'd be no point to it. But I think that did leave a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths that we got such a great race, but kind of a flat finish. Well, not kind of, a flat finish. I think a lot of people feel that a finish under yellow is flat, especially when you get a great race like that. If you get a race that someone leads 90% of, and it's kind of a boring race, I don't know if people really care if it finishes under yellow. But what did we have on Sunday? Like 52 lead changes? I think we all wanted to see a green finish there. But I'm with you. I think a consistent rule would be nice to have in that situation. I'll also say this, too. 1997, the 597, I think had something similar to this, but a little bit more egregious. Tony Stewart hit the wall coming out of turn 4, coming to 2 laps to go. They were very quick on the yellow trigger. I'm not sure if that really warranted a caution, but they did bring out the caution for his brush of the wall. And they made less than a full lap under caution and then threw the green and white together with kind of a lot of confusion. Arie Luyendyk was the leader, went on to win that race. Don't know if he really knew what was going on. There were still yellow lights on the back stretch, even though they had thrown the green with the white. I think Sunday was much more
no doubt.
What's the word I'm looking for? I think it was much more comfortable than that. That was out of control in 97. I think it was a little bit better than that. And I also say this, just to finish up that point. The Indianapolis 500 is not equal to any other race in the world. And I'm talking any NASCAR race, any Formula One race, or anything. And I think the Indianapolis 500 stands alone on its own island of the greatest race in the world. So I don't mind if things get judged or officiated differently in the Indy 500. I don't know if that opens up a can of worms for you guys or everyone else, but I think the Indy 500 stands alone. And whatever you can do to please as many people as you can, especially the people that spent hard-earned money to get into that racetrack that day, you try to please them.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is a place where anything can happen and dreams come true. I mean, Graham Rahal and a Chevrolet, that seemed impossible, and then lo and behold, there it was. So, I mean.
Yeah, well, guys, I totally get that side of the argument as well. And I think that you're absolutely right. This was much better officiated than 97. I think that's a very low bar to have to clear, but and I think better than 02 as well, because there's no debate. I mean, Paul Tracy will still tell you to this day there's a part of him that thinks he won that race. There is no debate in terms of who won the race Sunday, and there hasn't been any debate on this show here. We've all given our props and congratulations to Joseph Newgarden, thoroughly deserving winner, just as Marcus Ericsson would have been this year and was last year. So there's no argument there. My thing is, and Matthew, you bring up another good point as well, with how this race is officiated relative to other races all around the world, and this being, even though it has so much prestige, it is part of a championship that takes place throughout the season that used to award double points, now only awards single race points again. So I don't know how I would feel about calling it differently than we would other IndyCar races. But I think my biggest thing is not even the booth seemed to know what was going to happen there at the end there.
Yeah.
And I said this on wrap up whenever it was on Sunday. I said that on my my Instagram live that I did. The first red flag that was thrown of the 3, absolutely, I don't think there's anybody making an argument there. You had a very scary situation with Tyler going over the catch fence, Kyle Kirkwood getting upside down. That was one where I think red flags were justifiable for safety reasons. And the track at that moment was unsafe. You had a driver trapped in a car upside down. You had a question as to where that tire landed. Absolutely throw the red flag there. The second red flag, to me, it goes along the lines of what we saw last year when Jimmy Johnson crashed in 2014. I think was the first time that I can remember them really throwing a late red flag for a crash that probably didn't need it. But I said, you know what, if you want to try to get a green flag finish, that's the one attempt you're going to make, then I'll take it. I understand the perspective that a green flag finish is more entertaining. It gives more drivers a shot at making a late move. we can go ahead and do that. It was the third red flag on Sunday that I felt when you red flagged it with 2 to go, and normally the procedure is you get a full warm-up lap, and then you take the green flag, and you have less than 2 laps to go once you cross the line. There's not enough time to do the warm-up lap, and you're going to have a 1-lap shootout. That, to me, really bordered on the line of this seems like an egregious sort of crapshoot here that we're bringing one of the most prestigious races, arguably the most prestigious race, as you mentioned, Matthew, in the world, into a situation that, you know, do we really want these guys going 240 miles an hour all for broke here with 1 lap in a NASCAR-style green/white checker, I guess, in this scenario, sort of situation, not overtime, obviously, because at the bare minimum, it still ended at 500 miles, and I will take that any day over the Daytona 500 becoming the Daytona 530. But again, if you watch this show, you know how I feel. So I would like to see if we're going to continue to do this. I think, and I don't think we disagree here at all. I think there needs to be some sort of precedent set and some sort of mark made in the rule book so that we know going forward, this is going to be the procedure. Should we get a late race caution, here's what we're going to do. And if the caution comes out on the white flag lap, obviously, or with 2 to go, maybe even with 3 to go, there's not enough time, then we ended under yellow. Otherwise, we'll see if we can give the fans a green flag finish here, because that's what they came for. That's what they expected. But again, like you mentioned, Matthew, I don't think, you know, you talk about putting 300,000, 350,000 people into the speedway. There's no one size fits all solution that every single one of them 100% are going to agree on in terms of how we should best officiate those races. And I think that's important to keep in mind as well. So where can we find that balance of giving the fans maximum entertainment possible while also upholding the integrity of the sport? I think that's the challenge that we need to consider going forward here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would also say Marcus Ericsson has every reason to feel a little robbed here, as he kind of stated in that interview. He has every reason to be upset about this, because as we know, the aerodynamic package now, the leader on these restarts at Indianapolis is a total sitting duck. I thought he restarted it perfectly. Everyone had been waiting until as late as possible to go on those late restarts. He went in the short shoot, and I thought, that's brilliant. Try to catch him off guard, which he did. But even still, that didn't work. He has every reason to be upset. At the same time, we have every reason to also look at that and say, boy, we're a fan of a sanctioning body that put the fans first in that. And I love that. I really do love that they try their absolute best to give us what we want. I'll say this too, and I understand the argument of we don't want overtime or we don't want 1-lap dashes in IndyCar at Indianapolis because, you know, huge crashes can happen. I will also say we had one of the worst crashes I've seen in a long time with 16 to go, but we didn't in a 1-lap dash. Ultimately, it's up to these drivers to self-police themselves. That's a hard thing to do with an Indianapolis 500 on the line. I know. Pato O'Ward, was it with 8? Was it with 8 to go? He pulled out a last lap move with 8 laps to go. He was in no way did he have to make that pass in that corner or on that lap to have a chance to win. And as Matt White said on our broadcast, everyone was given a deck of cards to build a house with, and he took his cards, ripped them up, and threw them on the ground with that move, which he did. So I get the point of, do we want 1 or 2 lap dashes because it could cause a big crash? It could, but in this instance, we had big crashes with 8 and 16 to go, but not with 1.
Yeah, and that's a fair point as well, because we know that, you know, this is a dangerous sport, and, you know, sometimes it's a mechanical issue that causes a driver to lose control, and then there's nothing. I mean, you can drive as carefully as you want. You know, there's nothing you can do about that, and that can happen on every lap. The point that I made on the wrap-up show as well, and I'd be interested to actually get your thoughts on this, Matthew, as well here. I felt like I was reminded of the controversy when Robert Wickens had his accident at Pocono, and drivers were saying, and fans were saying as well, you know, we're too much on top of each other on these restarts here. The leader's backing the field up too much, and I think when the cars are closer together, it exponentially raises the opportunity for a crash, as we saw on the front stretch with whatever it was, 4 to go, I think, that ultimately caused the third and final red flag to come out. I would certainly be in favor of staggering the cars a little bit more so that there was more distance between them, especially on these restarts here late in the race, so that you give the drivers an opportunity. I said it on the wrap-up show, help the drivers help themselves. I think that that's something that IndyCar could potentially look at as well. Of course, I don't know how the drivers would feel about that in the moment, having a little bit more distance between each of the next few cars because there's only a handful of laps left. But what are your thoughts on that and the restart procedure? And does that play a role potentially in the danger that we see on these final laps?
Maybe it does. But it's interesting you bring that up because there's another topic that we're going to talk about here in a minute where I think I could bring this up. These are grown men and women racing these cars, given the responsibility of racing these very dangerous race cars. They should know how to police themselves. They should know how to make smart decisions for themselves. And they really, if they are professional race drivers, which they are, they should not need anybody in the sanctioning body stepping in and telling them how to race the race cars. That's how I feel about it. Again, I thought we had some strange restarts. We had Pato get one called off because he was trying to, again, play those games. When he was the leader, he knew he was a sitting duck, so he was trying to play some games, got one waved off. That's something else we brought up on Sunday, too, was do we need a restart line in the middle of the short shoot between turns 3 and 4 and say you've got to go by then? Because they were waiting a long time to get going, and that ultimately is what caused the crash that brought out that third yellow flag. Maybe that does need to be looked at, but if you're trying to create space between cars for a restart, I don't know how you're going to police that, especially in the final laps of the Indy 500.
Yeah, it's hard to police that at all with these guys. Yeah, I was also thinking about how Ericsson or Pato's just claiming that he got squeezed by Ericsson, and so we've got that whole thing to worry about too after this event.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point about Pato as well. You know, that was certainly a move that did not have to be made. I mean, that's a last lap move going for the win. That I would understand. With 8 laps to go, you know, I think he probably should have been a little bit smarter in that situation there.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe he should have. But again, we're trying to put ourselves in that position, and it's hard to do that, especially in that spot. But I just ultimately I believe that what happened was eventually for the best. We got a deserving winner. We didn't have the top 7 pile into each other in turn 1, and we didn't have the guy running 8th magically, you know, click his heels and all of a sudden he's in Indy victory lane. I think it turned out pretty well. I also think this is an outlier. Now, maybe I'm proven wrong and we have this happen 6 more times over the next 12 years. I don't know. But I think this is kind of an outlier on how the Indianapolis 500 is going to finish.
Yeah, well, it's important to remember just 2 years ago, we had one of the cleanest 500s in history. I think we only had 2 cautions all day, and it still ended up being a thrilling battle between Elio Castroneves and Alex Palou, and, of course, legendary history being made with Elio tying the record for most 500s, won in a single career. Brandon, do you want to respond to that, and then maybe we can transition over to NASCAR here?
Yeah, with the 2021 Indy 500, I was surprised. I was there, and I couldn't believe how quickly it was going. It was just amazing to see that we could actually escape carnage like that. And I think that is definitely going to be one of the outliers in the next 20 years. It definitely will be interesting to see. Like you said, Matthew, I guess only time really is going to tell as we go 10 more Indy 500s, whether this will end up being an outlier or maybe it'll, unfortunately, what if this becomes something that race control tends to lean towards, especially after they've seen this 500. I hope that's not the case.
Yeah, well, I think one thing we can all agree on is that as long as it doesn't turn into what we saw at the IMS Road Course of the NASCAR Cup Series the last 2 years, I think we have something good on our hands that we can, you know, take some peace and comfort in that it turned out okay. But
they're going the wrong way.
Yes.
You want to get me started on that one?
Well, we will transition here to NASCAR in just a moment, but you like I said, Matthew, thank you so much for giving your thoughts on that, because I think it's important for us to have this conversation, because it's one that certainly has divided the fans over the last 48 hours here as we continue to react to the finish of the race. And again, I want to move on here because we're already coming up on half an hour, I see. But, people were talking about Newgarden weaving down the front stretch, and it looked like if you take a still image, he's coming into the pits. And is that maybe something that needs to be policed? Because if somebody runs head on into the attenuator at 230 miles an hour, that's not going to end well. But that's maybe a discussion for another time. And again, we've got almost a full year before we come back to the Speedway for 2024 Indianapolis 500. So plenty of time to continue to have these discussions and maybe see what might change or what might stay the same going forward. Now, as I think most people will probably be aware, we did have some breaking news just a couple of hours before we came onto the air, and it involves Chase Elliott and Denny Hamlin in the incident that happened on lap 185 when exiting turn 4. Chase Elliott got squeezed into the wall by Hamlin. Elliott then retaliated by turning into Hamlin's right rear. This sent Hamlin into the outside wall nearly head on. After the race, Hamlin called it a tantrum by Chase Elliott. Elliott maintained that he had no control. Hamlin then tweeted telemetry from NASCAR.com, and according to the photo, he took a deliberately hard left into Denny Hamlin's number 11 Toyota. Now, last year at Las Vegas, NASCAR penalized Bubba Wallace for doing a similar move on Kyle Larson with a one-race suspension. Today, as I mentioned just a couple hours before we came out of the air, they announced that Elliott will also serve a one-race suspension and will not be a gateway. Corey LaJoie will be in the number 9, and in turn, Carson Hocevar will be in the number 7 that LaJoie normally drives for Spire Motorsports. Now, Wallace's suspension was announced 2 days after the race, while Elliott's penalty news broke less than 24 hours later. Last year, Wallace clearly chased Larson all the way down the front straightaway. The Elliott incident had more factors, such as how close to the wall he and Hamlin were and the timing of Brad Keselowski making contact as well. But there were also some differences. Ultimately, these two situations still very similar incidents at mile-and-a-half tracks. Now, here is what Hamlin had to say directly on his Actions Detrimental podcast that was released this afternoon.
There's no explanation that he could possibly give, which he didn't, of reason for hanging a left. He obviously didn't want to admit it. He did I can't hear you, sorry. And then, sorry, I can't hear what you're saying, but yeah, my car just couldn't drive it. Bullshit. The wheels were dead straight. Even after we crashed and, destroyed our he goes down the back straightaway, and you look at both tires, front tires are pointed the correct direction. And I pointed out in the data that I tweeted that once he got into the wall, there was nothing wrong with his car. He's turned the wheel back straight, like he was going down the straightaway, and you can tell by data whether you've got toe link damage or not. So you can tell that basically if your line is skewed one direction or another, where you have to turn it left, turn it right, whether you've been a toe link or done significant damage. For God's sakes, Tyler Reddick pounded the wall twice as hard as he did and didn't hurt his car. Everyone hits the wall. But he threw a hissy fit, and he just hung a left on us in the most dangerous part of the racetrack that you possibly could. And it ended my day and his, and in my opinion, he shouldn't be racing next weekend because NASCAR set a precedent last year on this.
All right, well, while we have Matthew here, I figure we might as well give him a chance to respond to this as well, because likewise, this is certainly going to be a hot topic over the next several days here. Are you surprised by NASCAR's swift action in penalizing Elliott? And ultimately, do you agree or disagree with the suspension?
I'm mildly surprised that they did suspend him, but I do think that is the correct decision. There was a precedent set last year, and he did the same thing that Darrell Wallace Jr. did at Las Vegas, except that he didn't come as far down because he didn't have that far to go. But yes, mildly surprised that they did it so quickly and that they did it to the sport's most popular driver. I understand that you would like to think that the sanctioning body takes every case and judges it fairly and as its own individual case, but something has to be said for this is the most popular driver in the sport for the last however many years. He was already out for a handful of races this year, and it is proof that in those races, the ratings dropped on television. Now, we don't know that they dropped because Chase Elliott was out. We're assuming that, but I think it's a pretty strong assumption that that's why those ratings did drop for those races. So put all of that together. Also put together that Gateway is a track that only hosts one race. There's probably going to be a lot of fans there in 9 shirts and Napa hats and everything else. It's not going to be able to see their favorite driver now. Put all of that together, I'm mildly surprised that they made this decision. I'm glad they made this decision, though. What he did was stupid. It just was. It's exactly what Darrell Wallace Jr. did at Las Vegas last year, as I said. And if you're going to suspend Darrell Wallace Jr. for that, which as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was the conversation of, well, Darrell Wallace Jr. also walked across the track and confronted Kyle Larson. From what I understand, though, the suspension was for what Wallace did. If I'm wrong on that, please correct me.
Correct.
Yeah, so it would just make perfect sense that this was the next step to take with what Chase Elliott did yesterday. To the point that I made earlier, though, can we just have drivers not acting so stupid from week to week? I mean, every week it's something. Every week it's someone's mad at Ross Chastain for doing this, or someone's mad at Denny Hamlin, or Denny Hamlin is mad at somebody. Denny Hamlin's mad at someone all the time. And these drivers are becoming the biggest hypocrites in the world. Denny Hamlin is screaming and wanting Chase Elliott to be suspended for a race for doing, okay, maybe a little bit more blatantly, but doing what Denny Hamlin did to Ross Chastain at Phoenix, intentionally putting him in the wall. So Denny Hamlin's screaming about that, while meanwhile Chase Elliott didn't like what Ross Chastain did at Gateway last year. But if he thinks Ross Chastain is doing things wrong, I haven't seen Ross Chastain right rear someone head on into the wall at 160 miles an hour either. So these drivers are becoming more hypocritical by the week, it seems. And I know you guys have talked plenty about Ross Chastain, and I have my opinions on that. I don't think he's done nearly the amount of stuff that everyone makes it out like he has. But like I just said, he hasn't right-reared someone, at least to my knowledge. But, I mean, Denny Hamlin, he talks about Chase Elliott throwing a temper tantrum. Denny Hamlin has been known to throw temper tantrums in the past, just as much as Chase Elliott has been known to go off on other drivers and how they're racing him, but yet he goes and turns around and does this. I'm thinking of Bristol a couple of years ago, and what Kevin Harvick did was hardly what Chase Elliott just did. So, I mean, again, back to the self-policing thing, it would be nice if these drivers would be able to just police themselves the way they're supposed to, but clearly they can't. And NASCAR doesn't want to step in and do this. NASCAR could not have, especially with all the stuff they went through this weekend with the weather and the logistics of running these races, the last thing they wanted to do was deal with this today and have to suspend the sport's most popular driver. But here they are having to step in because the grown men on the racetrack can't settle things themselves. They have to use their 3,000 however many pound race cars as weapons. They're acting like absolute children, and it's really, really sad. One other point I want to make on this too is I really hope this isn't the way we're going to go with things. Now, I know analytics rule everything in sports these days. I really hope that after every accident, we're not going to see a driver race to Twitter in the blink of an eye and say, well, here's the S&D data, S&D data. Look what he did. Look what you should suspend him. He turned left here. He hit the gas here. I really hope that's not where we're going. And I really hope that NASCAR then does not have to look at the S&T data and say, and look at every little finite piece of information. And he turned a little left here. Then he turned a little bit more. I don't want to deal with that. But again, I suppose they might have to if the drivers keep acting like children.
Yeah, Matthew, I agree with just everything you said there. Imagine a big house of drivers and Daddy NASCAR is sitting on his rocking chair and they get in a fight over the toy truck, and they run over. Look what he did to me! Look at the SMT data, and that's exactly what we saw. And my mind goes back to 2017, go all the way back to Martinsville, when really the Chase Elliott Hamlin saga kind of took its origins. You see, Hamlin take Chase Elliott out of his first potential win. And so Phoenix, he takes Denny Hamlin out of the championship. And so it began, and on we've gone. And
real quick, Brandon, everybody forgets just a couple laps earlier, Chase Elliott shoved Brad Keselowski up a couple of lanes to take the lead. Everybody seems to forget that because they lament the fact that he got robbed of his potential first win by Denny Hamlin. But just a couple laps earlier, Brad Keselowski was screaming on the radio talking about that as well.
Well, as did I forget that. Thank you for reminding me. But yeah, that's exactly right. All the points here. That's I'm glad he's being suspended. I'm very surprised they're doing that too. I think he's easily had the NASCAR's most popular driver award since Dale Jr. left. So 2018 to now would probably be the where he's sitting right now. And as I was thinking this over in my head, I was thinking, well, what are the differences with Chase Elliott's issue here and Bubba Wallace last year? And the only thing I could think of is, well, Bubba got out of his car, walked over a hot racetrack, and started throwing punches throwing hands at Kyle Larson, doing the push. And so there was a little more to that one. But I'm really surprised that they're getting to Chase Elliott's quicker and in such a timely manner. And also, really, if you're NASCAR from a business perspective, like you said, Matthew, they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot. It's their most popular guy right after a really tough weekend as it was. And St. Louis fans are not going to have Chase Elliott there. And that's going to make a lot of kids sad, and as it should, because Chase Elliott needs, and this is part of the policing themselves, maybe they need to learn that you're letting a lot of people who see you as their hero down. They're going to get their one, some kids, their one race a year to Gateway, some families, most families, and they're not going to see you there. And as it should be, you should be disciplined for your actions, and the most popular driver is no exception.
Yeah. And, I guess to Matthew's point, I'm a little bit mildly surprised, and especially that it came out today. I was expecting that the news would come out tomorrow, and our friends over at Grid Tonight would be able to take this story, and they will have much more on this story as it continues to develop here. It's all come together very quickly over the last couple of hours, like I was mentioning. But, Brandon, you're right. I mean, this Chase Elliott is going to have most popular driver. I mean, I don't know why they even bother with the vote right now. It's like it was with Dale Jr., and it's like it was before Dale Jr. with Bill Elliott, and it's going to be, maybe if Isla Earnhardt gets in the Cup Series car 20 years from now and Chase can go around, maybe he'll have some competition. I don't know. But until that happens, Chase Elliott has that. I mean, you might as well put his name on the trophy at the start of the year, every year that he's active and running full time, because I mean, that's the size of his fan base. And I think that makes it especially important that NASCAR put the hammer down in this situation and held true to the precedent. I got to tell you, if you want to talk about a firestorm on social media, not that there's going to be one regardless, because you know how Twitter can be. But I mean, imagine how the Bubba Wallace fans would have felt if Chase Elliott hadn't been suspended for a very similar situation, and all the consistently inconsistent memes coming back to haunt NASCAR. I mean, I think it would have been a very bad look after what they did with Wallace last year to let Elliott off the hook for this situation. Now, I'll also make this point as well, because I think this is important. Bubba Wallace had already been eliminated from, he wasn't even in the playoffs as a driver. He was driving a car that was in the Owners' Championship because of Kurt Busch's injury and everything. But you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that was the first race after the 45 got eliminated from the Owners' Championship. So that didn't have as many playoff implications. He did wreck a playoff driver in Kyle Larson, but or actually, I think Larson had been eliminated the week before too. But regardless, that was
Christopher Bell was caught up in it, who was in the playoffs.
Was caught up in it. There you go. That was the playoff connection there. I know we're not in the playoffs right now, but I did see before we came on, Kyle Larson or Chase Elliott's team, rather, they're not going to appeal the suspension. They are going to request a playoff waiver. If you give Chase Elliott a playoff waiver for this, the suspension is completely meaningless. Because we've already seen with Elliott this year, having missed races because of injury, if he can win a race, he's still going to, and the points requirement doesn't even exist this year. All he has to do is go out and win a race before the cutoff race, and he's in the playoffs, and all the races that he missed, all the points that he lost, they're magically erased, and it's reset, and we can go fight for a championship like nothing ever happened. If you give him a waiver, it makes the suspension, you basically just gave him a free vacation. I mean, who wouldn't love that?
But why wouldn't they give him the waiver? They give waivers out for everything else. They give waivers out for injuries. They give waivers out for sicknesses. They give waivers out if their sandwich had some mold on it. We give waivers out for everything now, even though at the start of this playoff system in 2014, there was that rule to make the playoffs. You have to compete in every race in the NASCAR Cup Series season. Well, clearly you don't. I mean, how many waivers have they handed out at this point?
Unless your name is Grant Enfinger, then you don't get a waiver. But Matt Kenseth got one for replacing Kyle Larson after the first 4 races. I mean, I understand that was an unprecedented time and situation and everything, but they hand the waivers out like candy. I mean, it's more shocking when somebody doesn't get a waiver. I mean, I can't recall. I mean, Grant Enfinger is the only one that comes to mind of somebody maybe should have been considered for a waiver that didn't get one. But I mean, they hand them out, like there's no tomorrow. So I'm sure he's going to get a waiver. I mean, it would be now. Again, I hope he doesn't, because I think that sends a much clearer message. And the fact that he's the most popular driver, it doesn't matter who you are, you're not going to get away with this. But I've got a feeling he'll get his waiver, and he'll probably, have that deficit erased and be able to fight for a championship like it never happened. And maybe it's a great redemption story, and the fans love that. But I got to say, I probably have a problem with it.
But something that I would like to see happen, and I said this last year in the Bubba situation, they can suspend him for a race, sure. I don't want him to be able, and I'm speaking of Chase Elliott here, or whoever, I don't want Chase Elliott to go to his vacation house in Colorado or wherever to watch the race with his feet up, enjoying Hooters wings or whatever else. I want Chase Elliott at the track, and I would like him up there in the officiating booth to see how difficult it is to officiate one of these races. I want him to be at the track to see his car run without him in it, and I want him in that officiating booth next to whoever is there that day to see how difficult it is, how difficult their job is. That's one thing I love what Cliff Kingsbury did. God bless him. He made Kyler Murray call plays in a preseason game to kind of say, hey, this isn't as easy as you think it is. I think they should do that with these drivers. I really do.
It's a great idea.
But, he'll, like I said, he'll probably sit in his vacation home or whatever, and he'll be given a waiver, and the only thing that'll come of this is that he doesn't score any points. And again, why they got rid of the top 30 rule either is beyond me. So Chase Elliott will have, after this suspension, 11 chances to go out and win a race and make the playoffs.
Yeah. I think they got rid of the top 30 rule because there was a debate about Corey LaJoie last year. He would have been borderline if he had won one of the Atlanta races. But again, with no disrespect to Corey LaJoie, and by the way, congratulations to him. He's got a great opportunity this weekend. I hope he goes and makes the most of it. But with no disrespect to him or Spire, that car was not winning a championship regardless last year. So I think it's a rule that's completely irrelevant. And you want to talk about what the champion should be, and Lord knows if we go down this rabbit hole again, the show's never going to end, so we're not going to do it. But those cars they're not going to be in the Final Four anyway. So it seems like a situation like, what are we doing here? So Brandon, I'll give you a chance to respond real quick. Otherwise, we can move on and talk about the winner of the race and get into the race recap. Do you have any more to add on this subject there?
I've stayed too long here. I think we're good.
All right. Let's catch up on the chat real quick. An interesting comment here from Nico777 saying cars are too safe. Unfortunately, drivers aren't scared to race like they do now because there's no risk, and until now, no punishment. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Safety should be paramount. Well, I will tell you, Nico, if we were having this discussion 2 years ago, I would potentially agree with you. I don't think we can ever say the cars are too safe, but I can understand the point that you're coming at with, the cars being so safe that we have a situation where drivers are not afraid to retaliate because 99.9% of the time they walk out with minimal injury, if any. With the next gen car, though, I think it's brought the safety conversation back to the forefront, as it should have, because it really prematurely ended Kurt Busch's career. It put a premature end to Alex Bowman's season last year. We have a situation here with this car that I think we're still trying to figure out the safety situation. And I think that makes it even more important that NASCAR come down on drivers that, especially right rear hooking somebody on the front straightaway. That's as egregious as it gets. So, I applaud NASCAR for being consistent and making the call to suspend Chase Elliott here, because I think that's something that they had to do in this situation. Joe says, I agree. A lot of economists call it moral hazard when drivers are more aggressive and they take more risks because they feel safer. And I think Joe's brought this up as well. I think that might be a conversation for just, the three of us getting in our car to drive, on public roads nowadays. Do drivers, they get in cars that have 5-star safety ratings, they feel invincible, and maybe that leads to more dangerous situations there as well. Adam says, love the idea, Matthew, about drivers getting a shot to be in the officials booth if they're suspended for a race. That's a heck of a point, Matthew. I got to hand it to you. I think that's a great idea, and I think that would, go a long way in being very eye-opening to these drivers on how difficult. I'll criticize the tower just as much as the next guy, but I will fully acknowledge if I were up there, it would be a tremendous amount of pressure, and it is certainly.
Yes.
Being a referee in any sport, and Matthew, I know you're a fan of every sport under the sun. You can speak to this as well. It is probably one of the most thankless jobs on the entire planet, because if you do your job well, you're just quietly go by unnoticed, and the athletes and the drivers, they're still celebrated. They're the ones that get all the glory. If you don't do your job well, everybody knows who you are. Everybody knows your name. Everybody wants to come for your job and everything. And it's a very pressure sensitive, very difficult job to do. And it's an important job to do well. And I think that putting the drivers up there to see what it's like, fantastic idea.
Sports referee is the tax collector of the modern era.
Can I just make mention one more thing? It just popped into my mind when you put up that comment about the cars possibly being too safe. None of the drivers on the grid raced in the 2001 Daytona 500, did they? And a whole bunch of them were either not born or not very old when Dale Earnhardt died, or even the year before when Adam Petty died, and the other drivers that died, Kenny Irwin and Corey Roper.
Tony Roper.
Tony Roper. Sorry. It makes you wonder sometimes. They don't know what that was like. Is that why they're acting? I'll use the word again. So stupid, because they don't know what it's like to race when it was somewhat commonplace to have people die in these cars.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think maybe that goes, we talk all the time, maybe the younger generation are just not mature yet. Maybe they're getting into the cars at a younger age than they used to. But I think that, you're right. These guys like, Ty Gibbs, for example, is younger than all three of us. He doesn't know a world, that Dale Earnhardt died before he was even born. So, that's something that he hasn't had to experience, a driver in one of NASCAR's top 3 series losing their life in an accident. I think that when you have a situation where that danger is very real, and not only real, it's everybody on the driver, every one of the drivers on the grid has experienced that in some way, because it used to be, unfortunately, a lot more commonplace than it is now. I think you're a lot more sensitive to the danger and the risk. And I think that maybe doesn't take all the aggression out. Dale Earnhardt himself, was known for being the intimidator and everything. But, I think it lets you know that there's a line that should not be crossed. And right rear hooking somebody, at 180 miles an hour or however fast they're going, it's just uncalled for. And there's nothing you can do to validate it. And I'm glad NASCAR put their foot down here and said, we're going to have him sit out a week, and we don't care if he's the most popular driver or not. It's unacceptable. All right. Well, we did have a race that ran to its completion a little bit later than expected, though, and I will go ahead and bring up the results for everybody here. Ryan Blaney won the Monday edition of the Coca-Cola 600 in a historic moment for Roger Penske. Of course, Penske has teams in both IndyCar and NASCAR. He'd never won the 500 and the 600 in the same year until Blaney did it yesterday. Blaney ran into the crowd to celebrate just as Joseph Newgarden did at Indianapolis on Sunday and is now locked into the playoffs. Now, Joe brought up this point when putting together the show for us tonight. It's also his first win since Kyle Petty made some comments that raised some eyebrows a couple of months ago, comparing him to Casey Kane for not living up to his potential. So, Brandon, I'll start with you. Blaney's now 10 wins behind Casey Kane for his career, 8 to Kane's 18. And actually, now that I think about it, ties Kyle Petty's career total as well as a driver. Does this win silence that argument, or does Blaney need more wins or potentially even a championship to really put the doubters away here?
Yeah, I mean, Ben, you and I both have a lot of respect for Kyle Petty and, of course, the whole Petty family there. But I think it is kind of ironic he is one to talk about a driver that didn't live up to possibly the potential of their namesake. I mean, Casey Kane had a lot of promotion behind him, a lot of great things going for him. But Ryan Blaney, I think he doesn't need. I don't know what I'm saying. he doesn't need more wins to prove that he's up there. I think he went through a drought, and I don't think he's going to keep going. He's not someone who's incapable of winning. This is his first win in the next gen car. I do know that. I don't think I thought this question well enough, so I'm going to leave it over to Matthew.
Well, first off, as a huge fan of High Point, North Carolina's Ryan Blaney, thrilled to see him get this victory. You could really tell, and Ryan Blaney doesn't show much emotion. You could really tell in that post-race interview how much it meant to him. And I think he would have shown that emotion if it was a Coca-Cola 600 or if it was at Gateway or wherever else. It's just a huge relief to finally get that victory. And, when Kyle said what he said, I kind of thought, wow, that's harsh. And the more you thought about it, you think, okay, well, he's got a couple of points there. And the Dover race is where I was really torn on Ryan Blaney because, boy, he had just as good a shot as anyone on that final restart at Dover. He was alongside Martin Truex Jr. with just a few laps to go, and you think those are kind of those moments where you want to see Ryan Blaney be more aggressive, right? Don't right rear him. Don't door slam him, as we were just talking about. But zero contact at all. And you thought, is that what is keeping Ryan Blaney from winning more? Is that he's not aggressive enough? We know that there's this fine line of aggression gets you wins, especially in NASCAR these days. But for him to go out and win as he did, had a great car from start to finish, did not fluke into it, didn't get a late caution and, a bunch of weirdness go on late. For him to win in that way really showed a lot from him and his team. Also, don't forget, or let's not overlook, him winning this race in a Ford on a 1.5 mile track. That has not been their bread and butter here lately. The Fords were next to nowhere at Kansas, next to nowhere at Darlington, not a 1.5 mile track, but somewhat comparable, or Las Vegas earlier this year. So for him to go out and win it means a lot to him. Also a lot for Penske. That Penske team has struggled this year. Joey Logano getting the win at Atlanta. Austin Cindric has been nowhere. I think his face is on the side of a milk carton this year. Huge for Ford, huge for Penske, and huge for Ryan Blaney. Thrilled to see him get that win.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, Brandon, obviously I'm with you, and I think I'm with you, Matthew, as well. Got a tremendous amount of respect for Kyle Petty and the voice that he is in this sport. And, I got to say, I saw his tweet this afternoon as well. He continues to be consistent on the issue of drivers intentionally wrecking others and deserving a suspension. He said that if it was good for Bubba last year, it's good for Chase this year. So kudos to him there. And I'll say, of course, Kyle Petty was no scrub either. 8 Cup wins is still a lot more than the vast majority of drivers who ever got behind the wheel of a Cup car can say they've done. But Ryan in particular, I think is somebody who has, obviously, I think still probably, I would hope, closer to the beginning of his career than the end. He's got plenty of time to continue to build on his legacy here, and all it takes is one 10-win dominant season like Kyle Larson had, and I think we completely changed the conversation about his legacy if he goes on to win a championship, which I certainly would not put past him. But I think up until this point, maybe Kyle wasn't completely off base, and that, Ryan Blaney was certainly a much hyped, much talked about prospect when he was coming up through Brad Keselowski Racing in the Truck Series and the limited Xfinity starts he got. He was driving for Tommy Baldwin's Xfinity team when his father Dave was, in his final few seasons racing in the Cup Series for that team as well. So, Ryan has had a tremendous amount of pressure put on him, I think, to live up to the expectations, and haven't quite seen that yet. He's kind of been a guy that you expect to maybe get 1 or 2 wins a year, probably be a round of 12, a round of 8 contender in the playoffs. But is he a true championship contender? I don't know if we've seen that from Blaney just yet, at least not on a consistent basis. So this win, and this win for Ford as well, Matthew, it's a great point you bring up. We'll lead into here in just a moment. I think it's exactly what Ryan Blaney needs. I know it's been a long off season for him after not getting a win last year, unless you count the All-Star race. I think that this is exactly what he needs to move forward and continue to build on this momentum here. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how he handles the rest of the season going forward. And, who knows where this is going to lead. This might just be the shot in the arm that he needs to go on a little run here, win a few races in the summer months, and then maybe we're talking about him as a championship favorite. I mean, it's in this era in particular, the narrative can swing one way or the other very quickly, depending on just a few races and how they play out. So we'll see what happens here.
He's my early pick for Pocono. I think he'll take victory again where he got his first.
Yeah. For the Wood brothers.
Shooting it out there.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, Matthew, I'll go to you first on this one. You brought it up. We talked about Ford being certainly the weakest of the 3 manufacturers this year, especially on the mile and a half, unless you count Atlanta, which I know is a mile and a half, but is now more of a super speedway in terms of how it races. But they've been behind in the win count. They've been behind in terms of pace, it seems. Is this the shot in the arm that the Blue Oval needs as well to get back on track across all their teams in the Cup Series this season?
You would certainly hope so. I mean, you look at the Ford camp and you think, who is the strongest Ford week after week after week? And I don't think you can come up with an answer for that. It's someone different every week, which on some level you think, well, that's good. That means you have parity. But you would like to see, especially with your defending series champion, Joey Logano, you'd like to see him step up and be the leader of the Ford group every week. He's just not. Kevin Harvick has been very consistent this year, but he hasn't really come close to winning a lot. He did come close to winning Phoenix, and depending on how you judge his second place finish at Darlington. But Harvick's not taking races and dominating them. Logano's not, as I mentioned. And RFK, what do you think about RFK from week to week? You think some weeks they are really turning it around and they're both going to win races, Keselowski and Buescher, and then other weeks you think, where are they? So I don't know where you are really with Ford as a whole through the first half and change of the regular season, but this has to be a big result for them, for Blaney to get a win again at a track like this, a mile-and-a-half track. And yeah, we need to come up with a term for Atlanta too. Good heavens, I'm tired of getting tripped up on, is it a mile-and-a-half super speed? Call it a hybrid, I don't know. But huge result for Ford, and you have to think that if they could build on this just a little bit, they need to, and hopefully we will see that. Because, like I said, where has Austin Cindric been all year? They need to see massive improvements from the 2 team. And I know you just put the results up there. Was the third best finishing Ford Zane Smith? For heaven's sakes. I mean, and I love Zane Smith, but should he be the third highest finishing Ford?
Not in a reality world. You got your mute mic there.
There you go.
Okay.
That's a heck of a point, Matthew. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, Zane Smith being that's really impressive. But yeah, Chris Buescher up there too with RFK, the highest finishing RFK driver. Look, we have 3 manufacturers you're going to have a weakest link every year. It's guaranteed. And this year it happens to be Ford so far. So I see that as just the nature of the sport, and these things will ebb and flow as we go. It just happens to be Ford right now. Hopefully this will be what they need. But really, you never can tell. And it is surprising, Matthew, that Joey Logano isn't leading the Ford camp after coming off the championship year that he had with the same car. And you look at Stewart Haas, like I really would like Chase Briscoe to step up, or Kevin Harvick in his last season. But really, from Stewart Haas, even there's not guys you can look to. And Ryan Preece, he came in and took Cole Custer's spot. Where's the results? They're not here yet. But maybe it's too early for that too. So we'll just have to wait and see if Ford can actually make something out of this. It would be nice to see all three being strong, and all three where people can identify, that manufacturer, they've got this guy, this driver really takes the cake with this manufacturer. I know Ford would appreciate to have one of those too.
Yeah, I mean, I got to say, when you look at Stewart Haas in particular, you look past Kevin Harvick, I don't see very much strength in that team right now. And I know Eric Almirola, probably isn't in everybody's, list of super elite drivers, but he's a multiple-time Cup winner. Yeah, he's won races in that car before. Chase Briscoe and Cole Custer before Ryan Preece, even, very successful in the Xfinity Series. And, I think drivers that we expected to come into the Cup Series and have some success. So, and I know Briscoe got a win in that car too. I know Custer shocked the world at Kentucky one year, but, those wins and those moments have been few and far between. And, again, and even Harvick had, a bit of a down year following his, epic 2020 season that arguably should have ended in a championship or at least a Final Four appearance. He was so dominant that year with his, I think it was 9 wins in 36 races. So literally a quarter of the races he won. And now just a few years later, it looks like, you look past his car, and of course he's going away next year. So whether it's just him being the veteran presence over there, and I know there are some heavy rumors yet to be totally confirmed, I believe, but I think we all expect Josh Berry to join that team next year and be the replacement in that 4 car. That's going to be a lot of pressure on Josh Berry to try to continue to maintain where that program is and elevate the rest of the team as well. So I think Ford certainly have a lot of work to do, particularly over on the Stewart Haas side of things. But, whether it's with Penske or whoever, anytime your manufacturer's in victory lane, it's got to be a good feeling. And I think that everybody at Ford can be proud of the effort that Blaney and Penske put forward this weekend. And for Blaney in particular, like I mentioned, I think that it totally changes the complexion of his season, because now there's not going to be any, limping around at Daytona with a damaged race car trying to hope that you're above Martin Truex Jr. in the cut line, because there's only one spot left in the playoffs, even though you're both top 5 in points, just with the amount of parity that we saw last year. I think Blaney's certainly in a very good place at this point, and he can take these next several race weekends and evaluate where every team is and try to go out, get a couple more wins under his belt, and we'll see where they go from here as we get into the time for the playoffs.
Hey, I can remember it like it was yesterday in 2018 when we introduced the Camaro ZL1, and we thought, where the heck is Chevy? What's going on there? And what's wrong with Hendrick? It's funny how quickly those times come and go.
No doubt. Well, Matthew, thank you again so much for joining us. And I saw a comment here from one of our regulars, Day in My Life. Actually, I'm a little bit curious myself. I didn't even realize this until just a couple of hours ago. You're in France right now, so thank you so much again for making time out of your schedule to join us tonight. What are you doing over there? You there for Le Mans? Are you there for some tennis? What's going on?
Definitely not Le Mans. We could always dream, I suppose. The French Open at Roland Garros, and it has been a lot of fun.
Nice.
Well, we will certainly let you get some sleep and get some rest and go continue to enjoy that. But Matthew Owens from USRN, thank you so much for taking some time to continue to discuss the Indy 500 finish with us. And, of course, all the late-breaking NASCAR news right before we came on the air. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. Encourage everybody to go follow you on social media. I'll bring your nameplate up here one more time so people know where to find you and know where to find USRN. Do you have any final thoughts for us before we sign off here with your part of the evening?
Yeah, just thank you so much. And anytime, I'm more than happy. But great show as always. You guys do amazing things. Enjoy Portland, and hopefully the weather will be much better in Portland this year than it was last year. But thanks again.
Yeah, it'd be hard to be worse than last year, but I think the forecast is trending pretty well right now. So thank you for that. And Matthew, we will hopefully see you soon. Don't be a stranger. I know you always stop by our chat when you can as well. So we appreciate that. And right now we're going to go into a bit of an intermission here. Josh Burch couldn't be with us tonight, but he also has some thoughts on Monaco and the Indy 500. And then he's going to give us his rundown of Formula 2 and Formula 3 at Monaco as well. So I will let Josh take it away.
Hi everyone, just thought I'd give my thoughts on what happened at Monaco and the Indy 500. Starting with Monaco, what a domination from Max Verstappen and Red Bull as well. That was quite surprising. They managed to hold on despite hitting the barrier as well. I think that was mainly down to the fact that Fernando Alonso forgot that it was raining and put on dry tyres when it was clearly intermediate weather as well. I think that is going to come back to haunt them in the future. Well done though to Verstappen. Mercedes, their upgrade seems to be working, but only for Lewis Hamilton. We're looking forward to the Spanish Grand Prix to see what he can do with George Russell. Further down as well, I think great weekend, mainly as well for Aston Martin in terms of knowing that they can have a race-winning car. It's due to be wet at the Spanish Grand Prix as well, so that could be something as well. Boy, didn't the rain give us exciting racing. The Indy 500, though, I think was the best race of the day, and, well, green, white, checkered. I can imagine what Ben was saying. I saw his Instagram live, and I can already imagine what he's been saying in the build-up in this show as well. But, yeah, I said, if you ever wanted a TikTok moment in the commentary, and that was it, the race was over in 60 seconds. We were there for 3 hours, 45 minutes as well. I think in total we were commentating for 5 hours. And it all came down to who was quickest over one lap. That shouldn't really be the case. I was quite surprised that we had 3 red flags within the last 10 laps. That is too excessive. It felt a bit like Australia. It was a fantastic finish. Let's not take away from Joseph Newgarden. He's been wanting to win this for years as well. He was third in 2016. He becomes the first ever winner from Nashville, Tennessee as well. Fantastic. His 12th win on oval and 27th career win as well. So fantastic for him. And I think we really just deserve it. But how much was Marcus Ericsson on it for a second back-to-back for the first time since since Helio Castroneves in 2001, 2002. It was so close as well. And I said Tony Kanaan because I think he deserved a better send-off as well. He was right up there. The red flag sort of cost him a chance to run at the front because he was getting himself into the race. So I don't really like it. It was a lot of pack racing. I think what happened with VK and Pelot in the pits was ridiculous as well. The Indy 500... very good race, spoiled at the end as well. And to say it as well, the Indy 500, great race, but a bit like spoiled milk at the end as well. But well done to Joseph Newgarden. He thoroughly deserves that win, but the rules have got to change on. Are we now doing green, white, checkered finishes like NASCAR and now Formula 1? Well, is it a sport or is it entertainment? You've got to draw the line somewhere. I drew it at sport, not entertainment.
Boy, if he was here for the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I'm sure we would still be going on that.
Yeah.
Brandon, real quick before we move on here, I do want to mention, I know you're from Tennessee, as is Joseph Newgarden. I can only imagine the sense of pride I would feel if a driver from my home state of Delaware won the Indianapolis 500. So I know we're not supposed to play favorites on this show, but I know that Newgarden being from the same state as you, I mean, does that just fill you with a different sense of pride seeing somebody from your neck of the woods win something so big on a global scale?
Well, let's put it this way. It makes you stand up at the TV and it makes your heart rate go a little bit quicker. He actually is the first Tennessean to win the Indy 500, which, I mean, there's 50 states. So, I mean, it's going to be a lot of firsts going on, but still, that's really cool. And, trying to stay as unbiased as possible. But, yeah, really proud to see a Tennessean win the Indy 500. I don't know when we'll ever see that again unless he gets a second one.
Yeah, well, I think this is one case, that like if by some miracle Logan Sargent won a Formula One race this year, I think we would all be very proud of him.
Americans
representing the United States for sure. Yeah, and likewise, I'm sure Josh would feel a sense of pride. If a British driver won the 500 again, I mean, it's something that I can certainly understand there. So congratulations to everybody in Tennessee, including yourself there. And, like we mentioned, I don't want anybody getting it twisted here. The problems we have with how the finish played out has nothing to do with who benefited or who didn't benefit. Joseph Newgarden unequivocally thoroughly deserved the win on Sunday and deserves a lot of credit for pulling off that last lap and running it to perfection. I know he was a little bit advantaged by the slipstream and everything, and it was maybe to be expected that he would be in the best possible position for that restart, but he still had to go out and execute, and he did. So 100% a deserving winner. Now let's move on to Josh's recap of F2 and F3, and then we'll get into the ARCA Truck and Xfinity races at Charlotte. Here's Josh.
So it was a crazy weekend as well, as for the first time in 18 years, Formula 3 came to play at Monaco, and also Formula 2 made their annual trip here as well. We'll start off with Formula 3 and take to the sprint race as well. Jose Maria Marti doing an absolute domination on Saturday morning, winning by 8.1 seconds around Monaco as well. Foloroli was second as well, just 7/10 ahead of Saucy as well, rounding out the podium. Colapinto did an amazing race. He was just behind as well. That little battle as well for second position. Taylor Barnard in fifth. Bortoletto, our championship leader, down in sixth position. Montoya was seventh. Browning eighth, rounding out the points paying positions as well. Collette in ninth position, then followed by Paul Aron, who had ironically a very bad session. Gabriel Mini in 11th. Boganovic in 12th. O'Sullivan 13th, dropped back early on. Too slow, Bedrin, Villagomez. Goleth as well, the first driver with a penalty on the board as well for causing a collision. He was given a 10-second penalty. Wisnicki, Ida Cohen, Mansell, Smith, Gray, Flörsch, Frederick, Barta, Garcia and Yanni rounding out the finishers. 3 DNF'd on the opening lap. Johnny Edgar, Maria Boya as well, and Roberto Ferrer all crashed out as well. It was Hugh Barta with the overall fastest lap, but the fast laps eligible for points went to Sebastian Montoya in 7th position. Moving on to Sunday morning as well for the Formula 3 feature race. Gabriel Mini, who took pole position on Friday, did an absolutely brilliant job. Won the race by 0.4 of a second to Dino Boganovic as well. Paul Aron getting back up into 3rd position as well, taking the podium. Browning was in 4th, followed by Bortoletto getting back up to 5th. Colapinto was 6th. Zach O'Sullivan 7th. Taylor Barnard in 8th position as well, getting a 10-second time penalty for leaving the track and getting a advantage at the start of the race. 9th for Jose Maria Marti, yesterday's sprint race winner, getting a few places up as well from 12th. And then Gabriel Saucy rounded out the points. Too slow in 11th. Bedrin was 12th. Goleth 13th, Edgar 14th, Smith in 15th, Villagomez 16th, Mansell 17th, Boya 18th, Gray 19th, Yanni, Garcia, Wisnicki, Flörsch, Foloroli, Frederick, Barta as well. 5-second time penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage as well. And then Roberto Ferrer as well down in 27th place. Kai Collette not classified along with Ida Cohen and Sebastian Montoya, who was disqualified from the race. He was given a 10-second time penalty for causing a collision. Then he was given a 5-second time for speeding in the pit lane, and then tyres not allocated to the correct position as well on the car. They were the wrong way round. He was disqualified from the event. So Montoya did finish in 3rd place, but was disqualified from the event. Now going over to Formula 2. And it was a bit more entertaining as well than Formula 3's procession. Formula 2 in the sprint race saw Amon Mawassa take a victory of 6.678 seconds to Johan Jaruvla. Jack Crawford was 3rd, Richard Verschoor was 4th, and then Maloney was 5th. Dewan, Martins, Porcher rounded out the points-paying positions. Frederick Vesti was in 9th, and Fittipaldi rounded the top 10. Brad Benavides, Roman Stanek, Kushmani, Arthur Leclerc 14th, Dennis Hauger 15th. One Manuel Correa, however, down in 16th position as well. He was given a 10-second time penalty for causing a collision. And then the last finisher, Clement Novalak, was given 2 penalties. One 5-second time penalty for speeding in the pit lane, and then a 10-second penalty as well for causing a collision. Out of the race, though, was quite big. Behrman crashed out. Cordial crashed out. Hadjar, Nazani and Boschong didn't even take the start of the race. The feature race, however, was very dramatic. A red flag coming out as well, as we had Jack Doohan smash at the top of the hill into Massenet with the rear of the car. He burst into flames, fluid all over the track. the red flag had to come out. It ended with Frederick Vesti and Theo Pourchaire in a very close battle, but Vesti took the win by 2.5 seconds to Pourchaire. Zane Maloney rounds out the podium as well. Then we had Richard Verschoor in 4th, Hauger 5th, Maney in 6th, Stanak 7th, Martins 8th, Crawford 9th, and Owasu in 10th, rounding out the points-paying positions. Behrman fought back from a poor weekend after crashing in qualifying to finish in 11th. Hadjar was 12th, Jaruvula 13th, Correa 14th, Roy Nazani 15th, Brad Benediva 16th, Clement Novak in 17th though, but received a 5-second time penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage. Boschong retired from the race as well in the pit lane, doing as I said, crashed and caused the red flag. Cordial, even though he was not classified, he did actually finish the race. He was 18 laps down, but was still circulating. Fittipaldi crashed out as well, and so did Arthur Leclerc on his home race as well. Very interesting weekend then for Formula 3 and Formula 2. The circus continues this weekend as we go for the Spanish Grand Prix.
Thank you, Josh. And real quick, an update on the ARCA Menards Series. Jesse Love took yet another win for Venturini Motorsports ahead of Dean Thompson, and we will talk a little bit more about Dean in the Truck Series segment. A very impressive weekend for him. Taylor Gray, Grant Enfinger, and Andy Jankowiak, a great run for him as well, up in the top 5. Frankie Muniz is 6th. He continues to be 2nd in the championship. I think at this point, it is certainly Jesse Love's championship to lose, though. He has been absolutely dominant these last several races here as you take a look at the rest of the results all the way down through the 28-car grid. Now, ARCA, of course, has the West Series in action the next 2 weekends, and as we mentioned earlier in the show, I will be out there this upcoming weekend at Portland with Joe Samniego, and then at Sonoma as well with Last Card Info and Brock Beard. So certainly looking forward to that. Lots of storylines heading into that weekend. I think we'll have several Xfinity drivers competing in both West Series races. Maybe Josh, not so much a fan of that, but I'll tell you, I will take that over the Cup drivers racing in Xfinity. But that's a debate, an argument we can maybe have over the next couple of weeks. We're already running long on time here. So, Brandon, I want to jump straight into the Truck Series race recap here. Ben Rhodes took victory at Charlotte, earning an extra $50,000 as this was his first race in the Triple Truck Challenge. Rhodes punches his ticket to the playoffs. Corey Heim leads the standings after a Stage 1 win and a strong second-place finish. And Dean Thompson, as I mentioned, right up there again, a career best by far, third-place finish in what was a great night for Tricon Garage as a whole. Even saw team owner David Gilliland himself get back behind the wheel. You see him down there in 14th place. A nice, solid night for the boss man. Brandon, how impressed were you by Tricon's performance as a team, particularly by Dean Thompson? See Taylor Gray up there as well with the top 10.
Yeah, it's really nice overall for Tricon there. Dean Thompson had a rocket ship at Charlotte, so good to see that all work out there for Tricon, especially after the whole big news with changing the full name of the team and changing to Toyota, and all of this going well for them this past weekend, and also seeing team owner David Gilliland in the car. That just puts the icing on the cake, and it's good to see a full team effort there. And seeing the behind the scenes stuff, I keep pulling this back, seeing the behind the scenes stuff at Tricon Garage, it's nice to see this, all the resources that they're putting into this team bear some fruit. It's good to see for them.
It's good to see a father and son partnership with a older generation driver that's still at least partially active here. I know David's days of racing full time have long come and gone here, but I'd love seeing him back out there, and I think it's a good opportunity for him to evaluate as well where his program is. They certainly had a great run this weekend, and I got to say, a great battle between Corey Heim, Dean Thompson, and Carson Hocevar for second. And again, being a dead horse here, but the Fox Sports coverage, I think towards the end, we all knew Ben Rhodes was running away with the win. I feel like fans would have liked to have seen that battle to the line there, but regardless, a great run by all of them. And of course, like we mentioned, Hocevar, if you're just joining us, you haven't seen the breaking news, he'll be in the Cup Series race this weekend, filling in for Corey LaJoie, who is filling in for Chase Elliott due to his suspension. But a nice solid run for him. But Dean Thompson in particular, I mean, this is somebody that I think just a few weeks ago, I was looking at his results this season so far and thinking, this is somebody that's really struggled to get up to speed with Nice Motorsports last year, now with Tricon this year. And it's great to see him, finally starting to have some nice, strong, solid results here. And again, I don't know if going down to ARCA to run a couple races with Venturini and getting some strong runs there, I don't know if that's been a positive momentum boost for him that's affected him on the truck side of things as well. But judging from his third place finish here, certainly hasn't hurt him. And, we'll see what he can do going forward as the season continues on here. But great run for him. Great run for Tricon as a whole. Completely agree with that. Let's move on now to the Xfinity Series. And Justin Allgaier finally got both his and his Junior Motorsports first victories of the 2023 season by making the fuel stretch in the finish or to the finish in last night's Xfinity race. So, Brandon, I just want to ask you, I know obviously we can talk about Junior Motorsports a little bit as well and how big this is for them. But in this stage racing era in particular, was it not fun to see a fuel mileage race just like the good old days go green all the way to the end?
Well, I have this note in my at my office desk, and it's a quote from theologian Warren Wiersbe. It's something, and I forgot how the quote goes. I see it every day, but it has something to do with the good old days are nothing more than a good imagination and a bad memory. Is what I think the quote. How I think the quote goes. But besides that, I miss fuel mileage racing. It was a fun thing to see, especially when you think about fuel mileage racing. You think about places like Charlotte, or I particularly go to Michigan, where that kind of thing used to happen a lot. And it was nice to have that experience once again, and them talking about him kind of, just nearly butting on the throttle. And once he was on the front straight, he was able to floor it all the way because he knew he was going to make it to the line. And that's really the kind of racecraft you don't see much anymore. So it was good to hear that radio conversation again and things like that. And clearly it's great that Junior Motorsports has got a victory in 2023. It was a little scary that it didn't happen until now, but couldn't think of a better guy for it to happen to. Justin Allgaier. His career is not over with. He loves the Xfinity Series. The Xfinity Series was made for him. His name is made there. And it's good to see Junior Motorsports finally get that chip off their shoulder, and now we got to get the other guys involved.
By the way, great run for Parker Retzlaff up there as well. In the sixth place finish, great outing for him. And Carson Hocevar as well, doing double duty as well, making an Xfinity Series appearance here. Justin Allgaier, obviously, it's huge for him. It's huge for everybody at Junior Motorsports. Kind of hard to believe that, with how well positioned they were at Daytona, running second, third, fourth, and fifth, not being able to close the deal there. That's taken them this long to get into victory lane this season. But, I'm sure this won't be the last time we're talking about that. It was only a matter of time before one of their four cars got into victory lane. And, I feel the same way, that I think a lot of fans did. We were just absolutely praying for there not to be a caution there at the end to send the race into overtime, because not only would that mess with the drivers that had been saving fuel, trying to squeeze every drop they could into their fuel cells to get to the end. But this is something that we don't get to see as much anymore. The stages, tend to interrupt strategy and bunch things up a little bit. And then it's inevitable that even if you do have enough time to get a full fuel run in the final stage, you're probably going to see a caution in the final stage that ruins that. So we don't see this nearly as much as we used to. And I got to say, it's certainly tense moments for the crew chiefs on pit road that are, stuck in their calculators trying to figure out, can they make it to the end? Can they not make it to the end? But for us as race fans to see that play out naturally and organically, you can't ask for much more than that. So
it was
seeing it at Charlotte again as well. I'm reminded, Austin Dillon won his first race in a very similar situation. So we have gotten it here a couple of times in the stage era, but it's certainly much more of a rarity than it used to be.
It was a certified Chad Knaus moment.
There you go. All right. Well, Brandon, obviously we're going to preview the weekend here coming up in Portland, and then turning around to go to Sonoma. That's the Xfinity Series this year. It was the Truck Series last year, but it's got to put a hard strain on these teams here, especially with the delay. And thank goodness they got the Xfinity race in Monday night. I don't want to even think about what they would have had to do if they had to come back today. They might have just postponed it for a couple of weeks, did what IndyCar did at Texas several years ago and said, we'll come back on the off week. But do you think the schedule needs a little bit of tweaking here? Should we really be, sending the Xfinity Series out there for this West Coast doubleheader, potentially on a short week with the weather in Charlotte this time of year, and, given the short turnaround to go all the way across the country? Do we need to tweak the schedule going forward in 2024 to maybe ease the burden for these teams here?
As much as it is a jump from Charlotte to Portland, I would also say be careful what you wish for. because the schedule how it is, I like the Xfinity Series being in Charlotte when they are. I don't know what the implications would be to get them closer to the West Coast, or to get to our. I guess what you're saying is, should we put Portland in a date where we're already on the West Coast?
Yeah, I would think Portland would probably be the date that shifts here, or maybe the Xfinity Series hasn't raced at Sonoma in, I don't even know the last time. Have they ever gone there? I mean, if they have, it was well before my time.
It was weird for the trucks to go there. I don't think Xfinity has been there.
Yeah. So I mean, this is something certainly in our lifetime, a brand new thing for the Xfinity Series, and I'm glad those drivers will get to run that track and get to experience that. But just from a logistical perspective, it's got to be a nightmare, especially for the hauler drivers. It's not as easy as just the driver hopping on an airplane and getting to the West Coast.
No.
You've got so much equipment that you got to transfer over there physically, and doing it on a short week in particular. Send your best thoughts to the hauler drivers this week, as they're going to be putting in the miles and doing some time crunching here to make sure make sure everything gets there on time.
Yeah, and the rain delays definitely didn't help it, and I know NASCAR wasn't planning for that, and none of us were planning for that to happen. And so, I mean, in a normal logistical planning, this would have worked out fine. But I think this is there's the not really to the rules. So, yeah, Portland may need to change what day it's on, but right now, I think you can keep the schedule how it is for another year, and next year we would be okay, hopefully.
Yeah, plenty of time to still think about that and see where the schedule goes from here. I apologize. We're coming up on an hour and a half, and I feel like my voice just recovered from Sunday. Now it's starting to go again after this extra long show we've got here. But again, lots to talk about. Very busy weekend with the weather and everything, and of course the greatest weekend in motorsports with Monaco and Indy and all that. So again, thank you to Matthew Owens for joining us. But now we're not even quite done yet. We've got a special preview of the Portland race weekend, since Joe and I will be out there for the Xfinity race in just a few days' time. The Pacific Office Automation 147, a massive effort for everybody to get Rose City ready quickly, or get them to Rose City after the rain delay, just as what we were talking about, and for everybody out there at Portland putting on this event as well. Now, earlier this month, Joe Samaniego and our own Matthew Bro as well got to interview a few drivers about the upcoming race weekend. Here's what second-year driver Sam Mayer said on how he looks forward to returning to Portland after last season.
Yeah, Portland is a really cool area purely because there's so many NASCAR fans and really proud motorsports fans hidden in there. So it's like a little hidden gem. It's really nice to kind of go to a city like that and be surprised with so many people and a lot of supportive people. Like, that many people came out in wet weather conditions. If it's dry this year, we're going to have a really big show on our hands. It's going to be absolutely amazing. I'm looking forward to Portland. It's going to be a really good show. I'm looking forward to seeing all the fans out there because obviously I haven't met a lot of them up there. So looking forward to meet all of them and hopefully have a good show.
Well, the good news for Sammy and everybody at the track this weekend is that the weather forecast is certainly much better. As of right now, it's looking like it's going to be sunny with a rough temperature of 82 degrees outside. Certainly much better conditions than the rain we saw pretty much throughout all the entire weekend last year. Now, this could also help John Hunter Nemechek, who has not had so much success on the road courses so far in the Xfinity Series. Take a listen to what he had to say previewing this weekend.
Accomplished in your Xfinity career, even with all your success, is you've yet to finish in the top 10 at a road course. But this season's different. You've had tremendous momentum, you and the whole JGR team. Do you think that statistic can be changed this coming next weekend at Portland?
Yeah, I definitely think so. We had speed at COTA this year before Hemrick took us out. So just one of those things, I guess, that happens. But we have definitely run well on road courses in the past. And seems like for some reason we get caught up in trouble at some point or something happens. So just gotta turn that luck around, as we say, make your own luck when it comes to that, and put ourselves in better position. So looking forward to coming to Portland, trying to get out there and try and go win.
Now, Nemechek's teammate Sammy Smith comes in as a rookie who's never raced to Portland before. Matthew asked him about coming to Portland for the first time with no prior experience there.
So you've never been to Portland, obviously. Last year, your teammate, technically former teammate Ty Gibbs, did dominate this race before he had contact under caution. Is any data from last year applicable, especially if we have a dry weather race versus what it was last year, which was a lot of rain?
Yeah, I think a little bit. I think for the wet side of stuff, it was mostly wet all weekend. I think maybe qualifying was dry for the first group, but for the most part, it was pretty much wet. So I think I guess I'll know what to prepare for if it was wet, but for dry, I think just kind of try and figure it out. I know I don't have much time. I've never been to Portland before, but we haven't done much sim, but I feel like for Portland, I'm excited to get there, and hopefully we'll have a good run.
Well, Brandon, as was the common theme there, it was pretty much wet all weekend last year with no competitive pit stops and sunny weather expected all weekend. This time around, could this be a drastically different race than what we saw in last year's Xfinity race at Portland?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're all going to benefit from it. And I want to thank Matthew for getting those interviews. Those were fantastic. And good to hear the different drivers' perspectives from the Xfinity Series about this weekend. And really, the biggest thing that I took away from last year when we talked about PIR was AJ Allmendinger going from Portland and winning the event, right? Is that memory serves me right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Won that and then had to make the trip over to Gateway and
got a top 10.
And got a top 10. Yeah. And I guess is why he's in the Cup Series now and full time again. But yeah, I'm really excited about Portland. I really like that track. And I like seeing it in IndyCar. And it was sad when we had the COVID rescheduling and we couldn't go to Portland. And good to know that there's a nice pocket of race fans there that are strong enough to stay out there during the rain because they love the product. So it's going to be a great time to get out there in dry conditions, normal tires, pit strategy, and one of the best turn ones in the country. I can't wait to see all the pileups, Ben. I know that's just what we're all waiting for.
Well, we'll see if the weather plays a factor here. I got a feeling maybe for the ARCA race, they're going to learn from their mistakes of the past and maybe bypass the chicane on the restarts when everybody's bunched up. But we'll see what they decide to do. I got to say, I'm glad we go to Portland. I'm glad that there's a race in the Pacific Northwest. I know that there have been some talks that, Joe would maybe like to see a way. Maybe we can bring the Cup Series out here. Hopefully my internet's still good. I'm getting that message from StreamYard again that it might be dipping a little bit. But I got to tell you, that's a market that I think was really underserved for several years when that track wasn't on the NASCAR schedule. I know Truck Series went there a few times in the late 90s and into 2000, I think. Great to see it back on the IndyCar schedule. Great to see it back on the NASCAR schedule and the ARCA West schedule as well. And again, I think by definition, it's going to be a different race from what we saw last year with the weather conditions. Of course, the weather is still subject to change. We still have a few days. And certainly in that part of the country, you never know quite what to expect. But certainly looking like it's not going to be a torrential downpour like it was last year. So that's certainly a good sign for everybody. As we mentioned, the forecast still shows sunny and clear Friday and Saturday. Both days having temperatures approaching the 80s, but weather, of course, is subject to change so far. Portland has had 65 days without rain in 2023. That's 70% of the year being rainy. It's the third rainiest city in the United States. So certainly hoping that we can dodge a little bit of a bullet here, and the forecast remains true to what it is right now. But rain or shine, we will be at Portland International Raceway all weekend. So be sure to subscribe to the Grid Network and follow us on all our social media. I think Joe's even promising some TikTok content as well. So make sure you follow us on all our social media platforms for Friday and Saturday at PIR. Now, Brandon, it's been a marathon show here for past an hour and a half. Lots to talk about and certainly lots to choose from when it comes to the one shining moment. So what is your one shining moment from this weekend in motorsports?
Well, I already made it about the Indy 500 on Grid Recap. And so this is probably one of the first of few weeks I've been on two shows in 1 week. So that's been kind of cool. But for our encore show, gonna have to give it to Carson Hocevar this weekend. Really great finishes both starts, fourth place with the trucks, eighth with his Xfinity race. And but I'm not really giving it to him for his finishes in the race car. I'm giving it for his work on Fox with all the weather delay, giving him the microphone. They just let him go at it for a good 30 minutes or so, it felt like. And Raja Karuth was on Instagram Live, and Red Slav showed up too. I mean, it was just a whole fun time, and they just let Hocevar go after it. And I don't know. I think Fox is giving him some sort of audition here. If the racing thing doesn't work out, he could definitely have a spot on TV.
Yeah, who knows? And of course, in the news today was that he'll be making a Cup Series start with Spire Motorsports replacing Corey LaJoie, who's in the Hendrick car. I got to say, just
well
real
deserved.
quick before well deserved as well. Real quick before I go into my one shining moment, you brought up a good point about AJ Allmendinger running his own version of the double last year, being somebody that had to hop. He didn't have much time to celebrate hopping in the plane from Portland to get to Gateway. I think that didn't, in the minds of many, rule Josh Berry out from being the replacement driver. I know everybody said they've got to find somebody different probably because Berry's going to be at Portland. Allmendinger did it last year, so I would assume that Hendrick could certainly come up with, and Chevy as well could come up with some accommodations to get Berry from Portland to Gateway if he wanted to. But nonetheless, great opportunity for Corey LaJoie and a great opportunity for Carson Hocevar as well to show what he can do in a Cup Series car. So we'll see how they do this weekend. As for my one shining moment, I'm going to give it to Dean Thompson. I know we talked about him quite a bit during the ARCA and Truck segments, but Dean is somebody that I think has, taken a little bit more time to get up to speed in the Truck Series, showed some promise in ARCA West, but hasn't been able to live up to that in the Truck Series so far in his young career. But he certainly finally seems to start to be turning a corner, and I think it's great for him. It was a great run, great podium finish, if you will, coming in third in the Truck Series race, and we'll see if he can continue to build on that. And we'll see how many starts he has with Venturini left. I wouldn't rule out an ARCA win for him going forward as well. So certainly great to see. That's my one shining moment for this weekend in terms of the series we usually cover here on GRID Live Encore, and that's going to do it for yet another episode. Thank you all who are still here, staying with us here for a marathon show on this Tuesday evening here. Again, everything being thrown off because of the crazy weekend we had. But be sure to subscribe to us if you're not already. Follow us on all our social media platforms: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, LinkedIn, most importantly, right here on YouTube. Help us on our journey to 700, 800, 900, and ultimately 1,000 subscribers. If you really liked what you saw tonight, take a few minutes after the show, invest in our Patreon. Join Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, and David in investing in Grid Network to keep us on the air throughout 2023. Our long-term goal of $500 per month will allow us to begin attending races just as Joe and I will be doing this weekend on site on a more regular basis, expanding our coverage for you, the viewers. If you'd rather make a one-time donation, you can follow the link in the description box below to buy me a coffee. You can buy a coffee for your favorite on-air talent. Any amount will help us continue to grow our motorsports media outlet. Now on Wednesday, Kobe Lambeth will be back with Josh Burch to bring you Grid Tonight with Matt White as well, and much more on the fallout from Chase Elliott's suspension. Joe Savaniego will be back with the Women in Motorsports program this weekend as well, with Daniel Zeri scheduled pending on when we tape that, because on Friday morning, of course, we'll be at PIR. But hopefully I'll be able to join them for that as well. And of course, stay tuned for more Grid Live coverage expanded this weekend, since we'll be on site at Portland. Brandon, any final thoughts before we sign off for this evening?
Yeah, Ben, wish you best travels to Portland, and also with Sonoma with Brock. And really, again, one of those weekends makes you proud to be a part of the Grid Network. So really proud of Joe and everyone in Portland. Hope you guys have a great time and also get a lot of coverage for us. And also looking forward to the weekend ahead. Really proud of Corey LaJoie. Hope he has a great run. And also, Joseph Newgarden is from Hendersonville, Tennessee. Yeah, it's said Nashville a lot, but I know they want to make it larger. But just so you are informed, he is from Hendersonville, Tennessee.
I will take your word for it on that, and completely agree. Great opportunity for Corey LaJoie as well, and Carson Hocevar. So excited to see how each of them do this weekend. Again, wish it was under slightly better circumstances, but again, that's the way things are right now, and I think NASCAR made the right call here on Chase Elliott. But if you want to hear our thoughts on that, go ahead and rewind to the beginning of the show. We talked probably for far too long on that here, an hour, 40 minutes. Thank you all so much for staying with us here on GRID Live Encore. For Brandon Crossland and Joshua Burch, for our special guest, Matthew Owens from USRN, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.